Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to wait just about 1 minute and then we're going to be ready to start the webinar. So if you could hold on for a minute and we'll make sure everybody gets in. Okay, well, I think we're going to get started because I want to be conscious of people's time. So thanks for everybody who's attending today. This is a webinar on the For-Profit Creative Venue Grant Program. And I'm Melissa Cerrone, and I'm Grants and Program Manager for the Office of Arts and Culture at the City of Sacramento. So we're going to take about approximately an hour today to go through this introduction to the program, and we're going to answer general questions you might have. Because it's a webinar and there's a lot of information to review, we're going to be taking most of our questions through the Q&A. So we do ask you to put all questions that you have in the Q&A, and I'll be stopping periodically as we go along to answer the questions. We'll check to see what questions are in. We'll answer them unless it's material that's about to be covered later. And at the very end, we're going to take more time for additional questions. So hopefully that works for everybody. I'm going to give you a little background today on how the program came about. And this is important mainly because you can see why we've designed this program the way we have and why it might have a few more requirements than some of the other grants the city offers. I also want to review the two types of grants. So we have both the Venue Recovery Grant and the Rapid Response Grants. And you can see which one you feel you should apply for. And obviously we'll go over the deadlines for each. Then we're going to spend most of our time on eligibility because we want you to apply for the amount and the type of grant that's most appropriate to you. We don't want anyone to waste their time applying for a grant that they don't qualify for and then miss one that they do qualify for. And these qualifications are based not only on the type of venue you are, but also where your venue is located. So I'll go over the geographic area support so you understand how we're determining where the grants are going to be going. We'll also look a little bit at what qualifies as a venue for the purpose of the grant. We have different types of venues, and we'll go over each one of them. And then we'll go over how the funds can be spent. And we're going to introduce you to our grant platform and show you how to access the application and go through the questions. We will be actually going into the application at the end of the webinar. And if you feel like you've already gone into the application, you know how to access it, you're familiar with the questions. At that time, if you don't have any more questions, you could leave, and the folks that really want to see how we actually get into the portal can stay for that part. And also I'll be going over the process of how we review applications. So how we do it, what the city is looking for. And as I mentioned, we'll review the timelines and we'll save plenty of extra time for questions. But the first thing that I want to stress before I say anything else is to tell you to please, please, please read the complete guidelines. Before you even open the application, go to our website, and we're going to put the web address in the chat. So that's how you're going to be able to access the guidelines. And I ask you just to read the entire document. I think what we found in the past is that many applicants who are not funded for two reasons. One is they just didn't review the eligibility requirements carefully enough. And number two, they never read the full guidelines. Sometimes you'll go straight to the application and think, well, I know how to answer these questions, so I'm just going to go to the application, save time, and get it done. If you don't review the full document, you may not understand how we're looking at the applications and how the panel is going to review them. So that's why we ask you to review everything. And then if you have any questions, you can also reach out to us. So that is the agenda for today. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that we have two types of grants, and both grants are only for live music, comedy, performance, art galleries, and independent bookstores. So no other type of venue can apply. So if you meet the qualifications for one of these types of venues, and you're located in one of 4 priority neighborhoods, you're going to be able to apply for a venue recovery grant. And if you meet the venue qualifications and you're not located in one of the priority neighborhoods, you can still apply for a rapid response grants. Venue recovery grants differ only in the amount a venue can receive. So if you fall in the music, comedy, and live performance category, you can receive $25,000. If you fall into the bookstore or art gallery category, you can receive $10,000. And those amounts are based on your ability to provide a budget, which demonstrates you have enough expenses to warrant the grant in that period. So if you're looking at all your qualifying expenses, even if you're a music venue and you say, well, in that 12-month period of the grant, I really only would have about $10,000 of expenses, we would encourage you to request the $10,000. You can request 25, but it's just one of those two amounts. It either has to be 10 or 25. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. And the rapid response grants that we have are grants for venues that have an immediate need for support. So say you have an emergency or you have an urgent need that it can be accomplished in 6 months or less. So for example, if your insurance costs have increased and you need to pay them and it's more than you had imagined it was going to be, that's an eligible expense and you could use that rapid response grants for that. And also, if you're not located in one of the priority neighborhoods for the recovery funds, you can definitely apply for the $5,000 grant. It's a streamlined application. It's a shorter turnaround time. And there are 2 rounds of funding. So if you apply in July and you don't receive it, you'll have another chance in September to apply. So the important thing to know is to understand which grant you're eligible for and to remember that you can only apply in one category. So be sure you're applying for the right grant. So there they are, the 2 different types of grants. So eligibility, I want to be really clear in this section because I'm guessing this is where many of the questions are going to arise. So what qualifies, for example, as a music venue? If I'm a restaurant, but say I program music once a week, am I a venue? If I'm a retail store that sells one-of-a-kind jewelry, am I a gallery? And if I'm a yoga studio that sells books about yoga practice and brings occasional speakers in, am I a bookstore? So for the purpose of this grant, in all of those situations, the answer would be no, you don't qualify. And that doesn't take anything away from your purpose or your need. But with the very limited funds that we have for this grant and all the venues that we have in the community, we had to be very specific about what would qualify for this grant. So here you see your mission or primary purpose has to be live performance, book sales, or art galleries. That's how you make your money. That's where your revenue comes from. If we look at your website and social media sites, it should be consistent with your purpose as a venue. And all of the attached documentation that we ask for of your business activities would then also be directly related to your purpose. So that's how you qualify. Let's see. So going into the specific types of venues, the live performance venues, the guidelines are really specific here. So I want to go through the qualification of each type of venue. So for live performance, comedy, music performance venues, first of all, you have to be a for-profit venue, which means tax status as a corporation, a limited liability company, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship. So it would have to be one of those categories. You have to regularly program original live music, comedy, or similar performing arts as the primary driver of your business, meaning that's where most of your clientele and your income comes from. You need to show that you pay artists and that you give a fair pay to artists. They don't play for tips and they don't play for free. You need to show that you pay one or more of the following. So that would be sound engineers, bookers, promoters, stage managers, security personnel, box office personnel. You don't have to employ all of them, but you have to show us that you employ one or more of those types of personnel. You have to have a paid ticket or cover charge to attend for most performances. You would advertise, have printed schedules, or use electronic publications, have a website, do e-blast, or promote on social media. We ask that you've been in business for at least 1 year prior to this application. So if the application is due in July, it would be 1 year prior to July 2023, and we'll be checking on that. You have to be located in the city of Sacramento. All of these grants have to be city proper grants. And very importantly, you also program local artists as part of your offering. They don't have to be everything that you program, but they do have to be part of your program. Okay, now, if you qualify as an art or a craft gallery, again, you need to be a for-profit business. So again, the same things: corporation, limited liability company, partnership, or sole proprietorship. Your primary purpose or mission is to support local artists and craftspeople through promotion, exhibition, and sale of work. So if you were a pottery studio whose main goal is to teach workshops and classes or to offer workspace to local artists, this would not qualify you as a gallery. You program on-site public events such as gallery openings, workshops, artist talks, and other events that are related to your mission. You promote these events through advertising, listings in print or electronic sites. You've been in business for at least 1 year prior to the application. So again, July 2023. And of course, you have to be currently open now. So you can't be on hiatus. You can't have closed your business during this period. You really need to be currently open, and also obviously in the city of Sacramento. Last category is bookstores. So again, the same qualifications as a for-profit business. You do need to have some evidence that you support local artists, local writers, independent presses through on-site readings, convenings, book club meetings, events, or performances, and that you would promote these events through advertising, listing, websites, e-blasts, etc. So to give you an example of a bookstore that might not meet the qualifications would be one where, say, a bookstore that sold used books or new books, maybe didn't promote or explicitly sell works by local artists, didn't regularly schedule events, readings, or performances. So that would be something that we might say is possibly not eligible. It's going to be up to each applicant to demonstrate how they meet the requirements and show evidence that they've done things consistently. And it needs to be a competitive, so it is a competitive grant. So that's why we're looking at everything, examples that you want to show, you want to make yourself competitive in this grant application process. So I've talked a lot, and I just want to take a look, see if there are any questions anybody has so far. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So Diane, if you see anything, let me know. Okay, let's take a sip of water and move on. So we know that venues exist in all parts of the city, but because this grant was created as part of our ARPA Creative Business Framework, we're following the city's ARPA guidelines. And they are serving neighborhoods that are disproportionately hit by COVID-19 and or have been historically underserved. We understand that all venues suffered, but the ones that have been prioritized for the purpose of this grant are Del Paso and Stockton Boulevard corridors, Midtown Sacramento, and Downtown Sacramento. So your grant would need to be, if you're applying for a recovery grant, it would need to be in one of these areas. Now, venues applying for a rapid response grant can be located anywhere in the city, but again, it must be in a Sacramento City district. So if you're located in an unincorporated part of Sacramento, you're not going to be able to qualify. Unfortunately, these are only city proper grants. And the application does include a map, and we'll show you when we get to the application, that's going to be able to locate your exact address and let you know if you can even complete the application. So before you get into the application, you'll need to put in your address. It will locate you in one of these areas and then allow you to move on to the next step. So I talk a lot about what's eligible, so I always feel like we need to spend a few minutes on talking about what's not eligible. Sometimes this is the quickest way to make sure that you're not wasting your time. So again, these would include businesses that are not in the geographic area of support, except again for the rapid response grants. Any businesses that are publicly traded, national or multinational businesses. So one example of this would be Barnes and Noble would be an example of a bookstore that would not be eligible because it would be a national business. Venues owned or managed in more than one state, again, not a specifically local business. Businesses that operate for the purpose of sporting events, karaoke, exotic dancing, fitness, or private events, such as galas and weddings, private homes, schools, and chain movie theaters. Venues that operate as public or private event spaces. I know we have a number of those here in Sacramento. They are not eligible. Pop-up or temporary spaces, again, not eligible because this needs to be a permanent venue. Retail stores not eligible, or cafes. So none of those would qualify, even though we know activity happens in all of these areas. Again, we have to be really specific for this grant. So how can your funds be spent? You've reviewed the guidelines, you've confirmed that your business qualifies under one of the three categories. You know how much you can apply for because you've checked the amounts based on your category. And you've also confirmed that you're in an eligible neighborhood, so you're ready to apply. How can you spend the money? Remember, these are city funds for relief and recovery. So the categories you can spend the money in are limited to what would help you recover and what's most beneficial for the local artists that you serve. The good news is the funds can be spent in some very basic areas where you can use them most. So those areas are venue rent cost, and obviously if you own your space, mortgage payments would also be considered eligible, but rent costs are one of the most basic and easiest costs to put forward for the grant. Insurance premiums, so if you pay liability insurance, workers' health, workman's comp, we know that those costs have skyrocketed over the last couple of years, and you could use this grant to pay those fees. Anything having to do with marketing and communication, anything that would have to do with your website development or website maintenance would be eligible. Ticketing systems are eligible. That would either be installing a new ticketing system, upgrading whatever system you have, that's eligible. Event permitting and security fees for public events, and obviously support for live events or series, which would include payment to artists. And that's obviously an important one for us. So just remember, when you submit your budget as part of the application, we're going to be really specific about the categories you put your expenses in. We'll need to see that you listed it in one of these categories above. And it's not enough to say that you're going to say, for example, spend it on contractors. If we ask you what you're spending it on, we're going to ask you what contractors you're spending it. Are they booking people, marketing contractors? Are you paying your artist fees with the money? And we'll ask you how they help you accomplish your events or your performances. If you're paying artists, we're going to ask you how much you're paying these artists. And if you're funded, we're going to also ask for a copy of the contracts that you have with the artists. We might ask to see payroll records, some kind of indication that you actually spent the money on these eligible categories, which is always why I encourage people as much as possible. When you're doing a budget, don't feel like you need to spread the money into every category. Don't think you need to do something that's so exciting that the panel will say, oh, yes, we must fund it for this purpose, but really use it on what you know you're going to spend money on. This grant is really to be used in about a 12-month period. So if you're applying for $25,000, what do you know that you're absolutely going to spend that money on every month? Use that as sort of the first round of what you're going to ask for funds for, because it's going to be so easy for you to show us documentation that you spent it on rent or insurance or fees or some of these things. So really stick with the things that you know you're going to be doing, as opposed to things that you think you might want to do. It's just always easier to then justify it and then get paid for it when it's all done. The application process, we'll be going over that a little bit. It shouldn't be too hard to complete. I don't think this is a really difficult grant application. You know, it's obviously easy for us to say on this end, but really it shouldn't take you too long to do them as long as you have the attachments that you need to upload. So if you've gathered all your attachments after you've read through the guidelines and looked at the application, then the questions are pretty straightforward. We're not asking you for really long answers to questions, but really just to tell us what we need to know for the application. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to complete a questionnaire that's going to ask you really basic information about your business, and it's going to ask for your contact information. So once you've completed the questionnaire, if you're eligible, then you're going to move on to the next section, which is the actual application. We're going to ask you some questions about your business. We're going to ask you who you serve, who you partner with, if that's applicable to you in the community. We're going to ask you to complete a budget form about how and tell us how you plan to use the funds if you're approved. Then there are going to be some attachments that we're going to ask for. One is a schedule of performances from 2023. So whatever, you know, you presented, or what if, say, for example, if you're a bookstore and you had readings or events, we would just ask you to put together a schedule of that. A projected schedule for next year. So I don't know if you do it in whatever year you do it in, but to project a year out. So if it's a fiscal year from July onward, it'd be 24, 25. If you do it in a calendar year, it could be 25, but however you project outwards. We will ask for a financial statement or an annual report from the last completed year. So in most cases, it would be from, you know, up through June 2024. If that's not applicable, whatever you could do earlier than that. A balance sheet for the month previous, whatever completed month previous you have. A copy of your signed W-9 form with your business address and your employee ID number. And we also ask, and this is all of our grants at the city, we have to have evidence that you are in good standing with the Secretary of State. So if you have a certificate that's current, or I think we provide a little checklist in the application, so you can go on a website, put in your name or your EIN number, and it'll pop up whether you're current with Secretary of State. And you could just give us a screenshot of that, and that would be sufficient to demonstrate that. Looks like there's some questions. So before we go into the application, let me see if I can run through the questions. If retail stores aren't eligible, how can a bookstore be eligible to apply? Does this only apply to the recovery grants, not the rapid response? No, that's not the case. Definitely, bookstores have just been pulled out as a very specific category. They're a category that is closely aligned with, you know, we are the Office of Arts and Culture, so it's closely aligned with the arts. It is really the literary arts, which we don't have a lot of opportunities to support. I do think the city offers other grant programs and other opportunities for retail stores. So we are really trying to pull out this, you know, small group of types of venues that don't often get support, and certainly not from our office. Can you explain what a venue is for this grant? We aren't a venue, but we are a performing arts group and hold speaking events at the Safe Performing Arts Center. Would we qualify? No, in that case, you would not qualify. What we think is a venue is a place that you're in charge of. It is your place, whether you rent it or own it. This is the address of your business. You are open for business. You have a door that people walk in. You have an address that people come to for events and activities. And that's why I say not just any bookstore qualifies. If you are a bookstore that really only 100% sells books and does nothing else, you would not qualify in the way that a bookstore that holds public events and is a community space and a community venue. So again, venues is just a way for us to support a space, like a permanent space, because we don't often have have ways to do this. When will the recording be uploaded? It'll be on our YouTube channel, and it usually takes, 2 or 3 days to get it uploaded. If we are a new organization to the community and we provide resources to artists, will that make our grant application more competitive, or will we be disqualified? If we provide additional social impact and social entrepreneurial programs, as well as helping build merch content and studio recordings, again, because I don't know what this is, it really needs to be primarily a venue. And if you say you're a new organization, if you're newer than 1 year, then I would say you would not qualify. If you've been around for at least a year and you're counting that as a new organization, you really need to demonstrate to the panel, and we'll talk about the application in a minute, that you really are a venue. I'm not going to tell you not to apply, but if you have any real questions, it might be worth it to email us at the email that we have in the chat, and ask some more specific questions about that. And if anybody has really specific questions about their specific business, it's probably best to just answer that in an email so that we can get through these. Will the opportunity reopen again annually? Oh, I wish it would, and maybe we will be able to have it again in the future. But right now, these are ARPA funds, so they're relief funds that came from the federal government, and once they're gone, they're gone. But we really do want to continue to support the creative businesses in our community, and we will try to find things. I think there was a second part of that question that I missed. I think it was something about, would there be another opportunity to apply again? If you get this grant this time, I don't think there's a round coming up afterwards, but I would say a little bit about the rapid response grant. So if you get the rapid response grant in round 1, and there is a round 2, you could apply for that. And I would say you would only be eligible to get that if there were not other qualified new applicants. So say you got it in round 1 and you applied again in September because you had another emergency need that needed to be met, and for some reason there were only 3 or 4 other applications and the money was there, you would be eligible to get that grant. So I would say take the opportunity and apply. Would a restaurant that opens a dedicated music venue space and has regular programming on a separate floor be eligible? It is a permanent space and addition. That's a really tough one. I mean, you really are talking about something that is a completely separate space. You would have to show in every category here that you're marketed as a venue, that your mission, your music venue's mission is, very specific, that you can show income, that you can show payment to artists, that you're doing an ongoing schedule. It's really going to be more tough if you're a restaurant, again, unless it is a separate entity that, it is somehow not all merged together with the restaurant, because we know that restaurants provide a huge boost to the community in terms of programming, music, and other kinds of events. But we really want to make sure that we are first and foremost funding those full-time venues that don't have any other income. They don't have, restaurant revenue that's helping them keep the doors open. So I'm not going to say 100% if you could, and feel free to email us and we could talk specifically. But I would say go and look at the guidelines carefully. And if you feel like you could answer every one of those questions, it's going to be up to a panel, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Please clarify about eligibility of cafes that regularly advertise live music. Does this qualify? No, it doesn't. Again, I go back to the kind of that qualifying question that you want to ask yourself: where is our revenue coming from? Where are we making our money? Are we making our money as a cafe and we also bring in music because it also generates some revenue, but it's a great thing for the community? Or is this really our main source of revenue? And that's really where we drew the line for this grant. And it's really not to discount the amazing stuff that's happening in all of these other types of spaces. It's just we had to create a grant that was really going to work for those full-time venues and make sure that they had a chance to get this kind of support. So that's my answer to that one. Okay, I think that's it for now, and happy to continue to answer questions as we go along. So I think some of you here might be new to our grants because, for the most part, the Office of Arts and Culture has funded nonprofit organizations and individual artists and not a whole lot of creative businesses. So this might be new to you. Maybe you've applied for other grants and maybe this is your first grant ever. So you're probably wondering how we select who gets the funds. So let me give you an example. Say there were, 75 eligible applications came in for the recovery grant, and there were only 29 total grants to be distributed. We'd need to have a system to determine who would get the 29 grants out of these 75 eligible applicants. So with the Office of Arts and Culture, we have a process that we use for all of our competitive grants, and that includes a panel review and a scoring rubric. So recommendations for funding are made to staff. So again, we don't recommend people for funding. We use a panel. So the recommendations are made to us from a panel, and that panel is comprised of independent individuals from the field. So in this case, because it's venues, we would invite folks with experience in the types of the venues that we want to support. So we would try to get on our panel somebody with experience in music, literature, poetry, and visual arts or crafts. We'd also want someone who has experience either in managing or booking or owning a venue. And often we add 1 or 2 city employees, not necessarily from our office, but from somewhere else in the city, with experience in economic or community development or maybe facility management. So that would be the panel of individuals who would review all of the applications. So they'd review them, score them, and the top scored applications are then recommended for funding. So the most important thing for you to remember is that you aren't going to be funded because, for example, you have the most successful venue in town, everybody knows you, everybody loves you. You're going to be recommended for funding based on how you answer the questions in the application and also in the quality of the attachments you submit and how closely you follow the rubric. So when you review the guidelines, look at the review rubric. That's a really important piece of it because it's going to tell you what's most important to us in your application. And that's really how you can frame your answers. So for this grant, the things that we're going to be reviewing you are on community impact, artistic impact, and demonstrated need. So first of all, for community, we're going to want to see what you're doing in and for your community. Are you having a positive economic impact on the neighborhood? Is your community coming to your programs and events? Do you create programs that the community finds valuable? Do you engage or partner with other businesses, schools, community groups? And do you support local artists and new artistic voices? And if so, how? We also then want to know about the art you present. Are you a place where people want to experience when they come to the city? Are you a place that visitors or tourists would come to? What are you paying artists? Why are you paying them what you're paying them? Are you supporting, great art that's happening locally? Are you supporting new original work, or are you preserving a cultural art form or a tradition? And finally, we want to know why you really need these funds. So what's going to be better with the funding and why is it critical to you now? So you'll be asking you to tell us about your loss during the pandemic and how you're working to recover. And we'll ask you to provide us a budget that relates to what you're telling us. So please know that we don't expect everybody to address every single aspects of all of these categories. You don't have to, be bringing in tourists and supporting local people and doing everything else. But the more of these things that you can bring to your application, the likelihood of your application being scored higher. And it's going to increase your chances of being funded. So just a note on the rapid response grants. These are the $5,000 grants. And for these, our staff is going to review them for eligibility and completeness. So we'll go through them all and make sure that everybody's eligible and they filled out everything. So if you've met the requirements, these grants are all going to be recommended for funding. Now, that's the case, but we're only distributing a maximum of 6 in this first round. So if we have more than 6 applicants, we're going to use the same rubric that we use for the recovery grants. And these applications will go to a more internal, a city panel for review. And the top 6 scored will be recommended for funding. So just remember, even if you're applying for a rapid response grant, pay attention to answering all the questions to the best of your ability, because your score may count in that case. But again, it might be much quicker, and it may really just be based on your eligibility. If you're eligible, we will fund you that amount. So lastly, before we go into the actual application, just want to go over the timeline. Obviously, the application is open. It's been open since June 7th. The webinar is today. For the recovery grants, the application period goes until July 19th. We took some questions and answers for the last couple of weeks, and we have posted them on our website. So even though it's the 25th, I think the questions are all published. So it's kind of a frequently asked questions. It's an FAQ that you can take a look at, and it might answer some questions that come up for you. As we say, the deadline is July 19th. At 11:59 p.m. Please, 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 whatever you do, don't wait until midnight, because the application will literally close then. So your window for pressing that submit button is 11:59. And if you feel like you have questions or concerns that are burning, you really need to make sure you get to us by 4 o'clock on that day, because we will not be available to help you or answer any questions after 4 o'clock. But I recommend, please don't wait till July 19th to fill out this application. It's not hard. And the sooner you get it done, you don't have to submit it right away. You can work on it in the next week or so, and then take a look at it, sit on it for a bit, and then submit it closer to the deadline if you feel like you want to make some changes. But don't wait till the last minute. It's usually tough when you do. It takes us about a month to go through the review period. We have to do the internal reviews, and then we have to give it to the panel for their review. And then we do like sort of a one big public meeting where they go through their final reviews. The award notification, again, it has to go through a couple of steps. It goes through our art commission first. We recommend the awards to them, and then they recommend them for funding. So that can take up to a month, hopefully no longer. So in this case, you know, sort of realistic timeline, you would be starting your funding. You'd have a contract with us starting in September, and the grant term is about 12 months. And I think in the guidelines, it says if for any reason you think you would need longer than a month to fulfill this grant, just, you know, obviously let us know that with your application. But we really do think the amount of money, it's like, it makes sense to finish up in 12 months. Rapid response grants are pretty similar. The application, or when we use the word NOFA, it just means notice of funding. Actually, notice of funding application. Sorry, don't know the exact A for that. Published on June 7th. The webinar is today. Questions are already published. So our first deadline, again, for the rapid response is a little earlier. It's July 8th. But we're going to have a second deadline, and that deadline is October 4th. So we'll open up that application probably beginning of September. And again, you'll have another chance to apply for that. Same thing, review period, a month, award notification, a month. It might be a little quicker, but I like to say a month because I don't want people to wonder why it's taking so long. Sometimes things just take a little bit longer when we're moving them through our processes. And the grant term is just for 6 months. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. You would get the majority of the money up front, and then fill out some reports and show us how you spent that money. And then we would give you the small amount at the end. And that's it. So I am going to look and see if there are any questions now. And for those who feel like they've gotten everything that they need, they can feel free to leave after the questions. But we are going to go into the submittable grants, and we're going to take a look at that. So if you want to see how to get into the application and look at some of the questions with us, we're going to be doing that in a minute. Please clarify about the payment to artists and rapid response grant. Is it a requirement that a bookstore pay a fee local authors who hold a reading, or it is enough that they benefit from additional book sales as a result of the readings? What are examples of payment to artists to fulfill the requirements? Yeah, I know within bookstores it is a little bit more difficult to show payment to artists. I think you would have to really do your best to show that that you've offered some kind of a payment to artists, that you've done something to promote their books. It's making that direct connection between what you do as a venue and how it serves the community. So we know that, I mean, a bookstore serves the greater community by just selling books and getting literature or whatever it is out there. But we also want to know that you are also responding to what's happening in our local community. So you could be creative in that area, but again, we would like to see that you're doing something very specific to artists. If you're not paying them, are you having a reading and having their books out there for sale and, helping support them in that way? I think that would qualify you. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna let Diana share the application and we'll go through that. Okay, so I think what we put in the chat is a link to this page on our website. And this page brings us to the funding for grants and funding and grants for arts and culture. And what you want to go to is the Creative Venues Grant button. From there, at the bottom, again, there are buttons, there are the guidelines. So please go to those first, but and it'll give you the approved areas if you just want to check the map first, how to complete the budget table, just in case. I would recommend everybody take a look at how to complete the budget table, because there's always questions around how to fill out the budget. And I think we went through every category so you can see what fits in the category and how you need to expend it. So I would take a look at that. Frequently asked questions, and now we're going to take you to the application. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like when you go in, and there are going to be a number of applications that are open currently, but you're going to want to look at one of these two grants. For today's purposes, we're going to go to the Venue Recovery Grant, but again, if you're applying for rapid response, make sure you go to that one. So be really clear before you start, you're going to the right application, because they are a little bit different. So there is the application. It gives you a little bit of the guidelines on the top, and now it asks you to fill out this questionnaire well, no, you've already gone through the questionnaire, I think. Yeah.
It looks like because we went through it, the eligibility questions are no longer required.
That's
So
okay.
there are a set of eligibility questions before you get to this main application.
Yeah, and they're very easy. They're really like pull down menu, check a box for certain things. If for some reason you go through all of them and everything that you put in was eligible, occasionally there's a little tiny glitch in the system that might come up and say, no, you are not eligible. I would just get out of it, go through it one more time, make sure that you've like answered all the questions completely and you're sure about your answers, and try it again, and it should be no problem. I want to bring your attention up to the top right hand of the page. It says Manage Collaborators. For this grant, if you're not doing it on your own, say you're working with another one of your colleagues or one of your partners and you're both doing different parts of the application, you would hit that button and that would allow you to bring in another email address, and that would be your collaborator. So either one of you could come in and work on the grant application. So it's just going to ask you those basic questions. Your legal business name, please make sure it's the legal name. Obviously, if you have a different name that you do business under, put that in. We ask for your grant contact information. So the person who's working on the grant, because that's the person we will contact with questions up until an application is funded. So make sure that information is correct and the email address is correct. And is that person the CEO? Then we ask where your business is located. So not a mailing address, but your actual address and a mailing address if it's different. Your business type, your employer ID number, your website address, if you don't have a website, or even if you do, any other kind of social media addresses that you have. We do ask you for the mission of your business or your purpose. If you don't have a specific mission statement, just tell us what your business is about. Again, don't feel like you have to use too many words. This is really just should be pretty easy and quick. The date you were established, which should correspond also with some of your other documentation. A brief description of your venue and its programs. You have 500 words for this. Again, don't feel like you need to use up all the words if you can do them more quickly. And we give you some little clues about how to answer it for the different types of venues, just so that we know, like, what's the size of your venue? If you are a performance venue, what's the capacity? How many people attend? What's sort of your annual attendance? Give us a little snapshot. If you were just talking to somebody and telling them about your business, what would you want them to know? And we'd ask you to put that there. And then we go into the 3 categories that match the rubric. And again, when you go back to the guidelines, you're going to see the rubric and how these questions align with it. So you'll get points for each one. So we want to know who your core audience or constituency is, in any way that you tend to categorize it. So whether it's geographic, cultural, any other kind of demographic information, what do you know about your audience? What do you know about the people that come to you? Please just don't say everybody, our audience is everybody in the whole world. That's probably true and that's great, but we want to know what you know specifically about your audience. And it's really just for us to know. How do you partner with or engage any other local businesses, schools, communities, groups? It would be hard to be a venue in this town and not have some kind of relationship with other people. So give us a little bit of information about that. Give us your venue's history of serving patrons and our customers from marginalized communities. We do ask it. We do want to know it. If you don't have a history, that's fine to say that we don't, but we would like to know who you work with and how you serve marginalized communities. So that's an important piece of our community. Then we go into the artistic impact questions. How do you highlight Sacramento's reputation as a cultural destination? And that could just mean as a local cultural destination. It doesn't have to be a world or a national or a state cultural destination, but how do you think of it as a destination? Describe the artists served by your venue. Tell us about your payment policy. Give us a rate of payment for artists and justification. It's really hard if you say we pay people from $50 to $10,000 and have that be the only information. Give us a little bit more. Who gets $50? Why? How much? Who gets, $10,000? Why? How often? That type of thing, just so we know. You'll see the word count is pretty small for most of these categories. So feel free if you just want to list things, if you just want to make an outline, don't feel like you need to write some great long, piece of prose here. And describe how your venue helps to serve to either preserve and share cultural heritage and or support artists who create and present original work. So those are the 2 things that we're looking for and we usually look for in our grant proposals. Are you working with artists who are really involved in a traditional or cultural heritage, or are you looking for new work? Are you helping to support artists who are going out into the world and you're like the venue that's helping them get going? And then we ask your demonstrated funding need. So really, again, it should fit into all of the categories that we've talked about. Tell us why you need these funds. Very simply, I need these funds because our rent has increased, by 20% over the last 2 years. It's been really difficult to keep up with these added expenses. at a time when perhaps we haven't got our audiences back up to the original level that they were at, and this money would help us at this time. That would be enough. We do ask you for your annual operating budget. And we will say, I think it says in the guidelines, and you will have to say that in the beginning. If, for example, your annual operating budget was $45,000, and you asked for $25,000, you would not be able to get 25,000 because your budget has to be more than double what you're asking for. So to get a $25,000 grant, your annual operating budget would have to be at least $50,000, which we think that probably most venues who've been around could show that level of support. And then we ask you to fill out the budget table in only those categories. You don't need to have a cash match. You don't need to have an in-kind match. It won't affect your ability to get this grant. It doesn't make you more competitive, but it's good for us to know because we compile all these figures. And these are all the categories and how you should answer those categories. So that should be pretty straightforward. And again, really stick to these categories. We do ask your organizational demographics. If you feel strongly about not wanting to put that, we respect that. It's not mandatory. It doesn't have a little red star, but it's really helpful for us. We don't specifically, we're not funding you based on these numbers, but we do compile the aggregate numbers so that we understand the economy of the people that we're funding. It helps us make a case for funding as we move forward. So really, if you know these figures, if you feel comfortable because you know your staff, please feel free to fill in these categories. And then we get into all of the attachments. It tells you the kind of attachments, and you're just going to upload them. The performance schedule, if you have a copy of a flyer, a postcard, a poster, any marketing piece that you might use to please attach. There's got to be something that you use that show us that you promote your work. An annual report, a financial statement, any kind of information on annual receipts so that we know what your annual budget is and what you spend it on. We ask for a balance sheet from the month prior to the application date. The most recent one that you have, May would probably be the earliest that we would accept for that. The W-9 form, again, is a PDF, and make sure it's signed. Everything has to be signed, and the certificate of good standing. And you'll see there's the link to the California Secretary of State. Really, all you have to do is you're just going to put in either your business name or your EIN number, and it'll pop up. And I'm assuming that most of you are in good standing, but things happen. Sometimes people, fail to fulfill paperwork. And if you feel like it's not coming up and it is an oversight or something that could be fixed really quickly, let us know about that. You could still perhaps submit the application, but again, if by the time it went to the panel, if it wasn't, certified, then you would not be able to go to the full panel review. And that's really it. As I don't think it's too long. Hopefully it's not too difficult to do. These really are just meant to support you and help you out with what your most basic needs are. So again, last chance for any questions. I hope that was really self-explanatory. You have our email address. If you have really specific questions, just reach out. But I hope this helped, and I really look forward to seeing all of the applications come in. I'm really happy to be able to offer this grant to the community and hopefully get it out pretty quickly. So thanks, everybody.